The conference room had achieved a level of tedium that Marcus Webb thought might actually violate the Geneva Conventions. 6 hours. 6 hours of discussing mineral extraction protocols with the kind of intensity usually reserved for defusing bombs or performing surgery. Except bombs and surgery eventually ended. This negotiation seemed eternal. Article 7, subsection 4, paragraph 12. The Astrin legal advisor said with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested he genuinely enjoyed this. The extraction rate shall not exceed. Marcus stopped listening somewhere around subsection because his brain had achieved critical boredom mass. He was a trade negotiator for Terran Commerce Initiative, which meant his job involved 90% patience and 10% preventing humans from accidentally insulting alien civilizations through sheer cultural ignorance. Today he was managing the 90%, and it was killing him slowly. Across the table sat Lyria Stellan, his Astrin counterpart. She was taking notes with the kind of focused intensity that suggested she actually cared about extraction rate specifications. The Astrin were elegant in ways that made humans look like evolutionary rough drafts. Silver skin with constellation-like patterns that shifted with emotion. Eyes that reflected ambient light like polished stars, and movements that were absurdly graceful. Lyria's patterns currently displayed what Marcus's cultural training labeled as concentrated professional attention, which looked like tiny supernovas rippling across her skin in geometric precision. She'd been patient through 6 hours of negotiations, more patient than Marcus deserved given how many times he'd had to ask for clarification on Astrin contract language. "Mr. Webb," Lyria said, pulling him back to reality. "Do you have concerns about the proposed extraction timeline?" "No, it's reasonable, well-structured, very thorough." Too thorough, so thorough that Marcus wanted to sleep for a week. Then we moved to Article 8, Environmental Remediation Protocols. Marcus made a sound that might have been agreement, or might have been his soul leaving his body. The Astrin legal advisor began reading from documents that probably predated human space travel. Lyria listened with that intense focus that suggested she found environmental remediation protocols genuinely fascinating. And Marcus, operating on 4 hours of sleep, 6 cups of coffee and 0 remaining filter between his brain and mouth, blurted out, "You know, with that level of dedication, you'd make a cute wife." But time experienced a catastrophic malfunction. The Astrin legal advisor stopped mid-sentence. The human observers on Marcus's side of the table made collective sounds of horror. And Lyria went completely still, her constellation patterns locking into configurations that made every Astrin in the room stare at her. Marcus's brain caught up approximately 3 seconds too late. That came out wrong. I meant you're very dedicated to your work. That was supposed to be a compliment about competence, not marriage, definitely not marriage." But Lyria wasn't looking at him anymore. She was looking at something past him, her patterns shifting through configurations that Marcus's translator struggled to interpret. When she spoke, her voice carried weight that made his sternum vibrate. "You have spoken the vow of intent. Before witnesses in formal setting." She paused, and when she continued, it sounded like she was reciting something legally binding. "I accept your proposal." The room erupted. Astrin advisors were shouting in their language, rapid, alarmed phrases that Marcus's translator couldn't process fast enough. The human observers looked like they'd just watched someone trigger a nuclear device by accident. And Marcus sat frozen while his life recalibrated around a single catastrophically stupid sentence. "I didn't," Marcus started. "That wasn't, I was making conversation." But Lyria's patterns had locked into formal configurations that apparently meant something significant in Astrin culture. She stood with movements that suggested ritual rather than spontaneity. By Astrin law and ancient custom, the vow of intent has been spoken and accepted. We are bound by the consort's pact, witnessed by your delegation and mine, recorded by conference systems. It is done. What is done? What did I just do? The lead Astrin advisor, an older male whose patterns suggested he was experiencing emotions that didn't translate well, spoke carefully. Human negotiator, you have proposed marriage according to Astrin custom. Lady Lyria has accepted. You are now formally engaged according to our law and interstellar treaty. The consort's pact cannot be broken without mutual consent or legal annulment. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I was tired. I was making small talk. We do that. Humans make casual observations about people being marriage material all the time. The Astrin do not. Such words are sacred vow, spoken only in witnessed formal settings, referencing specific partnership qualities. You met all criteria. I didn't know the criteria. That doesn't make the vow less binding. The conference room cleared rapidly after that. Astrin advisors hustling Lyria away, while human observers tried to figure out what to report to their superiors. Marcus sat alone at the table, staring at 6 hours of mineral extraction protocols that had somehow resulted in accidental marriage. His communicator chimed. Director Sarah Chen's face appeared, her expression suggesting she'd already heard and was contemplating early retirement. Marcus, tell me you didn't just propose to an alien diplomat through exhausted sarcasm. I can't tell you that because apparently I did exactly that. My office, now, bring whatever dignity you have left. Marcus walked through the conference facility corridors with the gait of someone whose career had just achieved spectacular self-destruction. Other negotiators watched him pass with expressions ranging from sympathy to schadenfreude. Someone had apparently already leaked the incident because a human journalist tried to ask him questions about interspecies romantic protocols. Director Chen's office was less office and more crisis management center. She sat behind a desk covered in holographic displays showing Astrin legal texts, treaty documents, and what looked like Marcus's complete personnel file. The cultural liaison, Dr. James Park, stood beside her looking like someone delivering terrible medical news. Sit, Chen said. Marcus sat. Explain. I was tired. We'd been negotiating for 6 hours. Lyria was being incredibly thorough about contract details, and I made what I thought was a casual comment about her dedication being marriage-worthy. It was supposed to be friendly acknowledgement of competence. Humans do that. Humans do that, Dr. Park agreed. The Astrin absolutely do not. The vow of intent is their formal marriage proposal. It requires witness setting, must reference specific partnership qualities, and once accepted creates the consort's pact, a binding legal arrangement recognized by interstellar treaty. But I didn't know that. Doesn't matter. You spoke the words, she accepted them, witnesses recorded it. You're engaged according to Astrin law. Dr. Park pulled up more documents. The consort's pact isn't just marriage. It's political alliance. You're binding with the daughter of a High Council elder. That gives you standing in Astrin society, access to succession codes if she holds rank, and protection under their honor laws. I'm a trade negotiator. I negotiate mineral rights. I'm not qualified for alien political marriage. You're qualified now. Congratulations. Chen pinched the bridge of her nose. Can he retract, claim misunderstanding? Technically, yes. But retraction requires proving the vow was spoken without intent or under coercion. Marcus was tired, but he spoke clearly in formal setting with witnesses. Proving lack of intent would be difficult and would publicly insult Lady Lyria's acceptance. So my options are honor an engagement I didn't intend, or cause interstellar incident by claiming my proposal was meaningless. Those are your options, yes. Marcus stood and paced because sitting felt like accepting reality. What happens if I just go through with it? Accept the pact, learn their customs, try to be a decent consort. You become politically significant, Dr. Park said. Lyria is ranked, trained diplomat, daughter of council elder, succession potential in several governance positions. Binding with you makes you valuable to factions wanting human influence in Astrin politics. It also makes you a target for factions that prefer humans stay politically irrelevant. And if I retract, you insult Lyria publicly, damage human-Astrin diplomatic relations, and set precedent that human words in formal settings can't be trusted. Plus, Lyria's acceptance is now public record. Claiming your proposal was accident or lie makes her look foolish for believing you. Marcus looked at both of them, at Chen's exhausted pragmatism, at Dr. Park's academic fascination with this disaster, at his own reflection in the office window, a guy from Earth's farm colonies who'd worked his way into trade negotiations and apparently had no survival instincts about keeping his mouth shut. I need to talk to her, Marcus said. To Lyria. Actually talk, not formal conference room talk. I need to understand what I just did to her life. That's surprisingly thoughtful for someone who just proposed through exhausted sarcasm, Chen said. I make terrible decisions, but I try to clean up after them. Lyria agreed to meet in neutral location, a garden in the diplomatic complex, designed to accommodate multiple species aesthetics and therefore pleasing to none. She arrived with 2 guards and constellation patterns that Marcus's translator labeled as controlled emotional state requiring effort. Without the formal conference setting, she looked less like intimidating diplomat and more like someone dealing with unexpected disaster while trying to maintain composure. She sat on a bench designed for someone slightly smaller than human average, which meant she looked elegant and Marcus looked like he was sitting in children's furniture. You wanted to speak, Lyria said. Her standard was flawless but carried accent that turned certain syllables into music. I wanted to apologize and explain and understand what the hell I just did. Marcus rubbed his face. That comment about you making a cute wife, that's human casual speech. We say things like that to acknowledge someone's competence or dedication. It's meant as friendly observation, not marriage proposal. I know. Her patterns shifted slightly. I've studied human customs. Your informal speech often uses exaggeration or hypotheticals for social bonding. You'd make a good partner, or I'd marry someone like you, are common expressions lacking formal intent. Then you know I didn't mean it as actual proposal. I know you didn't intend it as such, but intent matters less than action in Astrin culture. You spoke words that meet legal requirements for the vow of intent. You spoke them in witnessed formal setting. You referenced partnership quality, my dedication. Those are the criteria. Your ignorance of their significance doesn't negate their legal weight. Can you retract your acceptance? Claim I didn't meet the real criteria. No, her patterns shifted to something that might have been frustration or might have been resignation, because you did meet them, legally, formally, witnessed. More importantly, I cannot retract because doing so would dishonor your proposal. It would suggest I consider you unworthy, that your words were insufficient. That would insult you, damage diplomatic relations between our peoples, and make me appear capricious to my own society. So we're both trapped by something I said without thinking. Yes. She was quiet for a moment, patterns cycling through configurations Marcus couldn't interpret. Unless you wish to retract, that is your right under treaty law. You can claim the vow was spoken without understanding, without sincere intent. That path is available to you. But it would insult you and cause political problems. Yes. Marcus looked at her, at the diplomat who'd spent 6 hours patiently negotiating with someone who clearly didn't share her enthusiasm for extraction protocols, who'd accepted his accidental proposal with formal grace, who was now giving him the option to escape despite the damage it would cause her. What happens if we don't retract? Marcus asked. If we accept the pact and try to make it work? Lyria's patterns shifted to surprise. You would consider that, despite the circumstances. I said something stupid. You honored it with acceptance. Claiming my words meant nothing makes me a liar and makes you a fool for believing me. I'm not doing that to someone who treated my incompetence with respect. Her pattern cycled through emotions that Marcus's training couldn't quite decode: surprise, consideration, something that might have been hope. The consort's pact would bind you politically. I am ranked daughter of Council Elder Varen Stellan, trained diplomat, succession potential in governance positions. Binding with you grants you standing in our society, access to political circles that some factions prefer humans never reach. Why would they care? Because human-Astrin cooperation is controversial. Some support it as progressive alliance. Others see it as threat to our cultural independence. Your accidental proposal has already become political. If we honor the pact, you become symbol of human influence in Astrin affairs. Rivals will attempt to prove the pact is illegitimate, that you're manipulating me, that I'm being used for human political gain. And if they succeed, the pact is annulled, both our reputations are damaged, and precedent is set that human words in formal settings cannot be trusted. That affects future negotiations, alliances, everything our peoples have built. And if they don't succeed, then you're my consort, with all the political complications, social expectations, and cultural responsibilities that entails. You would need to learn our customs, participate in our society, accept that your accidental words have made you politically significant whether you intended it or not. Marcus laughed because the alternative was screaming. I made a tired comment about marriage and accidentally became a political symbol. That's extremely on brand for my life. Is that acceptance? It's acknowledgement that running from the consequences of my own words is cowardly. I said you'd make a cute wife. You accepted. Now I need to figure out how to actually be a decent husband, consort, whatever the proper term is. Lyria's patterns shifted to colors that Marcus's translator finally labeled with confidence, relief mixed with cautious hope. The proper term is consort, and you would truly attempt this, despite the absurd circumstances. I would, on one condition, which is, you tell me honestly, did you accept because the law required it, or because you actually wanted to? She was quiet for a long moment, patterns cycling through complexity. Both. The law required response, but I could have created delays, found ways for graceful refusal. I didn't. Why not? Because in 6 hours of negotiation, you treated me as equal. You argued without condescension, acknowledged my expertise, worked to understand our position. When you spoke the vow, even accidentally, you referenced my dedication as worthy of partnership. That's more respect than many intentional Astrin suitors have shown. Her pattern steadied. So yes, I accepted partly because law required response, but also because your accidental honesty reflected genuine appreciation. That matters in Astrin culture more than you know. So my exhausted sarcasm was accidentally the best proposal you've had. Essentially, yes. I'm choosing to take that as a compliment. As you should. And in the garden designed to please no one, two people bound by accidental commitment decided that maybe honoring mistakes was more important than avoiding them, and maybe partnerships built on genuine respect could survive absurd origins. But first, Marcus really needed to learn what he'd gotten himself into. Starting with approximately 8,000 pages of Astrin cultural protocols that Dr. Park was probably already preparing. This was going to be the weirdest year of his life. The cultural immersion program that Dr. Park designed for Marcus could only be described as drinking from a fire hose while also being on fire. 2 weeks of intensive training covering Astrin language, customs, political structures, social expectations, and the specific responsibilities of consorts in their society. The consort's pact isn't romantic by human standards, Dr. Park explained during day 3 of training. It's alliance. You're binding politically and socially, creating partnership based on mutual respect and shared goals. Emotions may develop, but they're not the foundation. competence and honor. Marcus reviewed holographic displays showing Astrin family structures, succession laws, and approximately 17 different greeting protocols that changed based on rank, situation, and time of day. So when I accidentally proposed, I wasn't actually saying I wanted to date her. I was saying I thought she'd be a competent political partner. Exactly. The vow of intent references partnership qualities, dedication, competence, honor. Romance is secondary to those practical considerations. That's actually less pressure than I thought. Don't get comfortable. The social expectations are extensive. Marcus learned to read constellation patterns, the shifting star-like formations on Astrin's skin that communicated emotion more precisely than facial expressions. What he thought was random pretty light show was actually complex emotional language that every Astrin learned from childhood. His human brain had to memorize hundreds of configurations, learning to distinguish between polite interest and barely contained rage based on geometric patterns that looked nearly identical. He studied Astrin language, which was musical and precise in ways that made English seem like grunting. His human vocal cords struggled with certain harmonics, but Dr. Park insisted competent effort mattered more than perfect execution. They don't expect you to sound Astrin. They expect you to try respectfully. He learned formal speech protocols, how to address council elders, how to navigate political gatherings, how to discuss policy without accidentally insulting someone's heritage. Astrin culture valued precision and formality in ways that made human casual conversation look like chaos. And he spent evenings with Lyria, who patiently corrected his pronunciation, explained cultural nuances Dr. Park missed, and gradually revealed personality beneath her diplomatic precision. She was witty in ways that Astrin formality usually buried. She had strong opinions about resource policy that went far beyond contract negotiations. She was tired, deeply tired, of political performance that required her to be perfect representative rather than actual person. "Sometimes I wish I could speak casually," she said one evening while reviewing his progress on constellation pattern recognition. "Say what I mean without calculating political implications." "You mean like accidentally proposing to someone through exhausted sarcasm?" Her patterns shifted to amusement, a configuration Marcus had learned to recognize with embarrassing fondness. "Your accident was refreshing. No Astrin would speak so carelessly in formal setting. Your culture's informal honesty is appealing." That's possibly the nicest way anyone's described my complete lack of filter. It's accurate description of your primary characteristic. They were interrupted by news that Marcus had been dreading. Lord Kethais Varn, a High Council member and political rival to Lyria's father, had formally challenged the legitimacy of their consort's pact. He'd filed documents with the council arguing that Marcus's vow of intent was human casual speech misinterpreted as Astrin formality, that accepting such proposals set dangerous precedent for cultural confusion being weaponized politically. "He's not wrong about the cultural confusion part," Marcus said, reading through the challenge documents that Dr. Park had translated. "I literally didn't know I was proposing." "But you spoke words that met legal requirements," Lyria countered. Her patterns displayed determination mixed with concern. "Intent matters less than action. Kethais knows this. He's using your ignorance as political weapon." "Why does he care? What's his actual goal?" "My father, Elder Varen, has advocated for closer human-Astrin cooperation for years. Trade agreements, cultural exchange, eventual political alliance. Kethais opposes this. He believes human influence corrupts Astrin traditions, that we should remain isolated from species whose customs are too different from ours." Her patterns shifted to frustration. "If he proves our pact is illegitimate, it embarrasses my father, undermines his policies, and sets precedent that human-Astrin partnerships are fundamentally flawed. So I'm a proxy in a political fight I barely understand." "Yes, but you're also someone who can defend the pact by proving your words, however accidental, reflected genuine respect. That's valid basis for a string partnership. The formal challenge meant the bonding ceremony, scheduled for 1 month away, would essentially become trial. If Marcus could demonstrate cultural understanding, if he and Lyria could prove genuine partnership potential, the pact stood. If he failed, if he confirmed Kethi's claim that he never understood or intended the commitment, the pact would be annulled and both their reputations would be destroyed. No pressure, though, Marcus said. Extensive pressure, actually. I was being sarcastic. I know, your sarcasm is becoming recognizable. That's progress. Marcus intensified his cultural studies, with the desperation of someone whose marriage depended on not embarrassing himself. He practiced formal Astrin speech until his throat hurt from harmonics his human vocal cords weren't designed for. He memorized political hierarchies, succession laws, and the specific expectations for consorts binding with ranked Astrin. He also learned more about Lyria's family. Elder Varen Stellan was progressive by Astrin standards. He'd advocated for human contact when many council members preferred isolation, had negotiated the trade agreements that brought Marcus to Astrin space, and genuinely believed cooperation between species was better than competition. Lord Kethi's represented the opposition, traditionalists who saw human influence as existential threat to Astrin culture. He wasn't wrong that human and Astrin customs were fundamentally different. He was wrong that difference meant incompatibility. 3 weeks into preparation, Elder Varen requested private meeting with Marcus. Lyria's father was imposing in ways that transcended physical presence. His constellation patterns displayed authority accumulated over decades. His movements carried weight of someone who'd made decisions affecting billions. Human Marcus Webb, Varen said, his standard impeccable but formal. You have bound yourself to my daughter through circumstances that many question. I have, Elder Varen. Accidentally, but I'm trying to honor that accident with genuine commitment. Kethi's will argue you cannot honor what you didn't intend, that your words were human casualness lacking Astrin weight. He's partly right. I didn't know I was proposing, but ignorance doesn't excuse dishonor. I said words that Lyria valued enough to accept. She trusted me to honor that acceptance. I'm doing everything I can to prove that trust wasn't misplaced. Varen's patterns shifted to something Marcus couldn't quite interpret. You speak like someone who understands partnership is work, not accident. I speak like someone who makes terrible decisions and tries to fix them afterward. It's my main skill. That is also valid skill. Varen moved to a window overlooking the Astrin capital, spires that seemed to grow from light itself, architecture that defied human engineering. My daughter is competent, dedicated, and trapped by expectations that require her to be perfect rather than genuine. Your accidental proposal gave her something she hasn't had, choice within duty. She accepted not just because law required response, but because you represented partnership without performance. I'm not sure guy who accidentally proposes is great basis for partnership. It's better basis than many intentional proposals that prioritize politics over compatibility. Varen turned back to Marcus. Kethi's will attempt to prove you're manipulating Lyria, that humans use cultural confusion to gain Astrin access. You can prove him wrong by demonstrating genuine understanding and respect, or you can confirm his fears by failing publicly. Again, no pressure. Extensive pressure, but I suspect you perform better under pressure than in comfort. That's disturbingly accurate. The bonding ceremony was scheduled in the Grand Council chamber, a space designed to intimidate through sheer scale and political weight. Hundreds of witnesses, both Astrin nobility and human observers, would watch Marcus either prove his commitment or confirm every fear about human Astrin incompatibility. Dr. Park provided final briefing the night before. The ceremony requires you to speak formal vows in Astrin, demonstrate cultural knowledge through ritual responses, and publicly affirm your understanding of what the consort's pact means. You'll be judged by the High Council, including Kethais, who will be looking for any sign you don't genuinely understand or respect what you're committing to. What happens if I mess up a pronunciation? Minor errors are acceptable. They show you're trying. Major errors, getting ritual order wrong, insulting someone through improper address, demonstrating complete ignorance, those would validate Kethais' argument that you never understood what you were doing. So I need to be competent enough to show respect, but not so perfect that it looks rehearsed and insincere. Exactly. You need to be authentically you, trying hard, occasionally stumbling, but genuinely committed despite the circumstances. That I can do. Authentic stumbling is my specialty. Lyria visited his quarters that evening, her patterns displaying nervousness that her formal training usually buried. Are you prepared? I've memorized everything Dr. Park could throw at me. Whether I can actually perform under pressure with hundreds of judgmental aliens watching remains to be seen. You'll be fine. You've learned more in 3 weeks than many Astrin learn in years. Desperation is excellent motivator. Marcus hesitated. Can I ask you something honestly? Always. Do you want this? Really want this? Not because law binds you, not because politics require it, but because you actually want to be partnered with the idiot who accidentally proposed through sarcasm. Her patterns shifted through complex configurations before settling into something that looked like vulnerable honesty. I want partnership with someone who sees me as person rather than political asset. I want consort who argues with me about resource policy because he's genuinely interested, not because he's calculating advantage. I want what you've accidentally given me, choice within duty, genuine respect within formal structure. She paused. So yes, I want this, do you? Marcus thought about the last month, the intensive cultural training, the political complications, the exhausting work of learning to communicate across species differences. He thought about Lyria's patience, her wit, her dedication to both duty and personal integrity, about discovering that partnership built on respect could be more genuine than romance built on attraction. Yeah, he said, I want this. Which is weird because I didn't intend it, but here we are. Here we are, she agreed. The morning of the ceremony arrived with appropriate dramatic weight. Marcus wore formal Astrin attire that felt elegant and completely wrong for someone from Earth's farm colonies. The garments were designed for Astrin physiology, which meant Marcus looked like he was wearing someone else's very expensive clothes and hoping nobody noticed. The Grand Council chamber was exactly as intimidating as advertised. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into architectural impossibility. Hundreds of seats rose in tiers around a central platform where Marcus and Lyria would speak their vows. Astrin nobility filled the seats, their constellation patterns displaying every emotion from supportive approval to hostile skepticism. Human observers occupied a separate section, Director Chen looking exhausted, Dr. Park looking nervous. Various diplomatic officials looking like they were watching political theater that could either strengthen or shatter human-Astrin relations, depending on how badly Marcus embarrassed everyone. The High Council sat at the elevated platform, Elder Varen displaying supportive patterns, Lord Kethais displaying confident opposition, 5 other council members whose patterns suggested they could vote either way depending on Marcus's performance. The ceremony master, an ancient Astrin whose patterns suggested he'd conducted these rituals for longer than humans had been in space, called the gathering to formal attention. His voice carried harmonics that made Marcus's sternum vibrate. We gather to witness the bonding of Lyria Stellan, daughter of Elder Varen and Marcus Webb, human trade negotiator. The consort's pact has been invoked and challenged. This ceremony will determine its legitimacy. Lyria stood beside Marcus, her patterns locked in formal composure that probably cost significant effort. She wore ceremonial robes that made her look like living starlight. Constellation patterns shifted to traditional bonding configurations. Marcus was supposed to speak first, formal greeting to the council, acknowledgement of the witnesses, declaration of his intent to honor the pact. He'd rehearsed the Astrin phrases until they were muscle memory, practiced the pronunciation until Dr. Park declared him acceptable for human attempting impossible harmonics. But standing before hundreds of witnesses whose patterns all screamed, "We're judging you," Marcus's carefully rehearsed memory decided to panic. The Astrin phrases dissolved into linguistic noise. He could see Kethise's patterns shift to satisfaction. Here was the proof that the human never truly understood what he was committing to. Then Lyria placed her hand on his arm, subtle gesture, probably violating ceremony protocol, but her touch carried reassurance. Her patterns shifted to supportive encouragement that cut through Marcus's panic. He remembered why he was doing this. Not for politics, not to avoid scandal, but because he'd made commitment to someone who deserved honor. Because running from mistakes was easier than fixing them, but fixing them was right. Marcus spoke in careful Astrin, his pronunciation imperfect but sincere. "Honored council, gathered witnesses. I stand before you having spoken the vow of intent without understanding its weight. I spoke casually, without knowledge of your customs, and in doing so bound myself to Lyria Stellan through words I didn't intend as formal proposal." Several council members' patterns shifted to configurations suggesting this wasn't the defense they expected. "But ignorance," Marcus continued in his imperfect Astrin, "doesn't excuse dishonor. I spoke words that referenced partnership quality, Lyria's dedication. Those words had meaning even if I didn't understand that meaning. She accepted them in good faith, trusting that human who spoke them would honor that acceptance." He paused, aware his Astrin grammar was probably terrible but hoping sincerity compensated. "So I've spent 3 weeks learning your customs, your language, your expectations for consorts. Not because law forces me, but because Lyria deserves partner who tries to understand her culture. Because commitment made in ignorance can still be honored with knowledge. Because running from mistakes is easy, but fixing them is right." Marcus switched to standard because some things were too important to trust to his mediocre Astrin. "I didn't know I was proposing. I was tired and making what humans call casual compliment, acknowledging someone's competence through informal observation." But Lyria heard those words as something more significant, and she accepted them. She trusted me to honor that acceptance. So I'm here, having learned what I can, prepared to build partnership, trying very hard not to insult anyone with my terrible pronunciation. Several Astrin made sounds that might have been laughter, actual laughter, which apparently was rare enough in formal ceremonies to be noteworthy. Even some of Kethise's supporting council members' patterns shifted toward surprised respect. Lyria spoke her acceptance in flawless ceremonial Astrin, affirming Marcus's sincerity and their mutual commitment to partnership. Her voice carried confidence that made Marcus's stumbling attempts look even more amateur by comparison, but that was probably the point. She was competent enough for both of them. The council members conferred privately, their patterns shifting through complex configurations that Marcus couldn't interpret even after 3 weeks of intensive study. This was it. The moment when they decided whether his accidental proposal and genuine follow-through was sufficient basis for legitimate partnership, or whether Kethise's argument about cultural incompatibility would prevail. Elder Varen spoke first, his patterns displaying supportive determination. "The human has demonstrated genuine effort to understand our customs. His proposal was accidental, but his response has been honorable. I support the pact's legitimacy." 3 other council members voiced support. Their reasoning varied, but the core was similar. Marcus had shown respect through action, and that mattered more than perfection. 2 council members opposed on traditional grounds. They argued that accepting accidental proposals set dangerous precedent. That partnership required intention from the beginning, that Marcus's ignorance invalidated his commitment regardless of subsequent learning. Kethai's prepared to cast his vote, the deciding voice that would either validate or annul the pact. His patterns displayed the kind of calculation that suggested he'd been planning this speech. "The human is incompetent at our language," Kethai said, his voice carrying formal weight. "His customs are fundamentally different from ours. His pronunciation is terrible, his understanding of our traditions is incomplete at best, and his original proposal was made in complete ignorance of its significance." Marcus felt the ceremony slipping away, felt the month of work dissolving into political reality that ignorance and good intentions weren't enough to bridge species differences. But Kethais continued, his patterns shifting to something Marcus's training identified as reluctant respect. "He has spent a month learning when he could have fled. He has attempted to understand our ways despite obvious difficulty. He has chosen integrity over convenience, commitment over comfort. He stumbles through our language with sincerity rather than speaking perfect lies." The chamber went quiet. "I have witnessed many intentional proposals," Kethai said, "made with perfect formality and complete calculation. Partnerships built on political advantage rather than genuine respect. This human's accidental proposal, followed by authentic effort to honor it, demonstrates more integrity than most intentional courtships I've seen." His patterns stabilized into decision. "I support the pact. The human has earned legitimacy through action, not through perfect adherence to forms he never learned. That is honorable." The chamber erupted in patterns Marcus, interpreted as surprised approval. The ceremony master declared the pact legitimate, the bonding recognized under a Strin law and interstellar treaty. Marcus and Lyria were formally consorts, their partnership validated despite its absurd origins. After the ceremony, in private quarters away from political theater, Lyria's formal composure finally cracked. Her patterns shifted through relieved joy, exhausted satisfaction, and genuine affection that needed no translation. "You were terrible," she said. "Your pronunciation was awful, your grammar was worse, and you violated approximately 7 ceremony protocols." That's not very romantic post-wedding feedback. It's accurate feedback. Also, it was perfect. No Estrin would have stumbled so authentically. Your incompetence proved your sincerity better than perfection could have. I'm choosing to take that as compliment. As you should. 6 months later, Marcus had somewhat adjusted to life as alien consort. He worked with Lyria on human Estrin trade agreements, bringing human pragmatism to Estrin formality in ways that somehow made negotiations more efficient than either species achieved alone. He'd learned to read constellation patterns fluently, could speak Estrin with only moderate accent, and had become minor celebrity in both civilizations, the human who accidentally proposed and actually followed through. Lyria told the story constantly, her patterns displaying amusement every time. "My consort proposed through exhausted sarcasm during contract negotiations. It's very human. It was an accident. It was perfect. No Estrin would have spoken so casually in formal setting. Your honesty, even accidental, was more genuine than any formal courtship." That's weird compliment. I'm told I'm weird at compliments. You're learning from the best. They worked well together. Her formal precision balanced his human informality. Her cultural knowledge guided his well-intentioned stumbling. And somehow they'd built genuine partnership from completely absurd foundation. Director Chen visited occasionally, still looking like she was processing the month when Marcus's exhausted sarcasm accidentally revolutionized human Estrin diplomatic relations. "You know the trade agreements we've signed since your bonding. They're unprecedented. Turns out having someone who can navigate both cultures makes everything easier. So my disaster became diplomatic asset. Your disaster became our most effective cultural bridge. Don't let it go to your head." Too late. And in their shared quarters, reviewing policies that benefited both their peoples. Marcus and Lyria continued their accidentally successful partnership, built on respect, maintained through genuine effort, and proven successful through sheer stubborn commitment to honor mistakes rather than abandon them. "You'd make a cute wife," Marcus said one evening, echoing his original accidental proposal. Lyria's patterns shifted to affectionate amusement. "I accepted that proposal 6 months ago. You're late." "I'm punctually challenged." "That's accurate. But I mean it now, intentionally, with full understanding of what I'm saying." Her patterns shifted to something that transcended translation, joy and affection and partnership that needed no words. "Then I accept, again, with full understanding that you will continue to make terrible jokes at inappropriate times." "That's fair." And in the diplomatic complex, where human and Astrin work together despite their differences, two people bound by accident proved that sometimes the best partnerships start with mistakes, that honoring commitments you didn't intend to make can lead exactly where you were meant to be, and that love, or respect, or partnership, or whatever you called it across species lines, was built through choice and effort more than through